Hello, trumpet friends. This is the first video in a series. It's going to be a series on how to get a good sound, and this is the introduction video. Before we get into what you have to do to get a good sound, let's get some terminology straight. This is the terminology that I use. It's influenced by my teacher in El Paso, Sam Trimble, and also it's a mixture of that, what he taught me, and then a mixture of Jim Thompson. I went to a master class and he had some interesting things to say. And my terminology, my vocabulary that I use to talk about sound today is rooted in what I learned from those two people. The first one, so let's talk about what is sound. Sound is the coming together of your tone quality. Now, what is tone quality? Tone quality is your balance of overtones. So you can have a bright tone, you can have a dull tone. If we were to start a sample in the middle of your note and then end also in the middle of your note, you'll be able to hear from that what your tone quality sounds like. Then we have this other thing that we call tone purity. In other words, what kind of fuzz or what kind of noise is added to your basic tone quality. So if you have a tone like that, your tone purity is low. If you have none of that, your tone purity is high. Okay, so that's definitely tone purity is a component of sound, and it's not necessarily desirable to have a perfect 100% tone purity. There are types of music, and we're going to get into that in a little bit in this video. There are types of music where tone purity might not necessarily be desired. So then there is added to your tone purity, your tone quality, added to that you have your your style, and your phrasing. What creates your sound is a package of all of those things. For me, when I talk about style, I'm talking about note shape. I'm talking about how percussive is the tongue, how legato is the tongue. I'm talking about how do you stop the note. I'm talking about the shape of the note. Like, is it louder at the beginning, softer at the end, stuff like that. Is it the same volume all the way through? Also added to style is your vibrato. How can you say that vibrato is not part of somebody's sound? All of these things come together to create somebody's sound. And if we want to have a great sound, of course, it's got to start with tone. You have to get a good tone, an appropriate tone. Let's use the word appropriate, okay? Let's use the word appropriate. And we're going to talk a lot about that. Anyway, so what else do I have? You know, this video is introducing all the other videos that I'm going to talk about sound. And I'm going to talk about each one of these things individually as an introduction. There's an article that I wrote, I don't know, about 15 years ago, that was called 1,001 Reasons for Your Bad Sound. And the thesis of that article was that you could do everything correctly. In other words, you could do even what I'm teaching. You could do what I'm teaching, and out of 1,001 different reasons, one of those different problems could come in and destroy all the good stuff that you're doing. And my favorite thing to use as an example of that, and I've actually got some of that going on right now, is chapped lips. You could do everything correctly. You could, now I'm not one of those guys that says, this is how you get a great sound. I don't have a physical formula. I have a strategy that you can use to help you get a good sound. But there are people out there, now I disagree with them obviously, or I'd be teaching what they teach. There are people out there that they say you do this, this, and this, and this, and that will give you a good sound. And the problem I have with that is this idea that there are 1,001 things that can destroy that. You could do everything they say, and there are 1,001, I just picked the number 1,001 because it sounds good, right? Probably it's infinite. There are probably infinite numbers of things that could give you a bad sound. And there's no way that the teachers can know what that is. Not without studying you and working with you, and that's part of the reason why I'm making this video, is this whole formula thing doesn't really work, in my opinion. Anyway, so yeah, you could do everything correctly, even according to what I teach. And if you have terribly chapped lips, you're not going to get your best sound. And there are 1,001 of those, or actually infinite numbers of those kinds of things. And it's our job as teachers to work with you to find out what's getting in the way. Now, obviously, as a teacher, we're going to first say, do these things. And we're going to talk about what I teach for that. Do these things. But if you are doing those things and you still don't have the sound you're looking for, there's something getting in the way. There's an obstacle. Okay? All right, what else do I have on here? Tone. Tone is mental. When we talk about tone, now usually when people say, oh, this guy's has a great sound, most people don't use the terms the way I do. What they mean is tone. They say that guy has a great tone, that girl has a great tone. Okay? Getting a great tone it's dependent on a perfect balance. And when I say perfect, I mean perfect beyond human comprehension. That kind of perfect. In other words, we can't know whether we're doing it or not. Nobody can say, do this and you're going to have a great sound, because it's in here. It's in here. A perfect balance. That's what I mean by perfect. The balance between air and resistance has to be exactly perfect to get that sound. Even a tiny bit of difference will create a different sound. And it is my opinion that those differences are beyond, when I said earlier, beyond human comprehension, that's what I'm talking about. We can't feel what we're doing accurately enough. We don't have control over what we're doing accurately enough to do that with our conscious mind. We don't have that. This is, I say this with other stuff too. Sound is where I got this from. It's also true with range. Think about what is range anyway. Range is when you play at a higher frequency with a good tone. It's not about just getting the higher notes. So for me, it was always this mental aspect of both getting a good tone and playing high, is because those variables are beyond our reach with our conscious minds. We can't feel the difference, and we can't control our lips and our air and our tongue and all that stuff well enough to make that difference. And for that reason, this is why I don't believe the people that have physical things that they teach you to get a great sound, why I disagree with them, because that's beyond our control. That is beyond our control. We cannot do that. Now, there are things you can do to foster that, the mental side of what we're doing. And that's how I teach it. That's my approach, is that it's going to be more on the mental side. And that brings me to the next point. The reason why you are playing the trumpet matters. If it is mental, if playing the trumpet well is 99% mental, then it matters. It greatly matters why you are playing the trumpet. The rest of what we're talking about will make no difference. You have to have an understanding of why you're doing this. Well, and we talked about this when I was doing the comeback series. We talked about some of these reasons. There are people who play trumpet because they want to glorify God. There are people that play trumpet because it's fun. Think about the difference between those two. The way somebody approaches the trumpet, if they're just having fun, and then between that and someone who's trying to honor God, to glorify God with praise and worship, the methods are going to be different because the mental state is different. And I'm not going to go into a full list in this video because that's a different video. This is an introduction video, right? But that's, you have to take purpose in mind. Why are you playing the trumpet? You know, I talked about this in the Comeback Players guide, the video guide that I put together for this, but it's actually for everybody. You should always be aware of why are you doing this, because that will always help you make the right decisions along the way. If I don't have any problem teaching people who just want to have fun. I have students that have told me point blank, I just enjoy playing the trumpet. I want to do more of it. I want to do it better. Because the assumption is if you play trumpet better, you're going to have more fun. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. And I'm going to teach that student differently than I will the one who's trying to worship God with his horn. So, and this is even more true when it comes to the sound that you're trying to play with, because because the tone quality that you get is dependent on the mental aspects, and the mental aspects are driven by your motivation. I'm going to say that one more time. The mental aspects of playing the trumpet with a good sound are driven by your motivation. That's why you have a lot of people, and I've seen this many times over in my career. I've seen many people who were not clear about why they're doing this, and a lot of times they beat themselves up. They hate what's coming out of the bell. These people will always struggle to get a good sound. Always. Because their purpose is not clear. I just got an email with a video attached from a previous student who did struggle with sound in that way. I won't say his name because I don't know if he's comfortable with that. But he sent me this video of him playing Misty, and the email was about how this wasn't the main point of the video, but the way he said it, the way I'm seeing it now is he says, I know why I'm playing the horn now. I have a reason to do the horn. He's not a music major. He sounds better than he did when he was playing all the time. And, you know, when he was more, quote unquote, serious about playing the trumpet. He sounds a lot better now. And I do believe that when we get our purpose straight, the mental stuff tends to fall into place. You know, a lot of times we get, I shouldn't be talking too deeply about this because there will be a full video about this, but a lot of times we get sidetracked by what other people want. And I'm not one of those people that says, don't do what other people want you to do. I'm not like that. I think you should. As a Christian, I'm here to serve people. But that service never assumes that you are, you know, leaving your objective behind. Does that make sense? Anyway, we'll talk more about that in the video on purpose. Then the next thing we talk about is listening, and you guys have heard me talk about listening. How do you know what kind of sound you're striving for if you don't have a oral concept of that sound? It's not possible. You have to do listening. The more live that listening is, the better. The more live the listening is, the better. That's one of the reasons why I play in the students' lessons. One of the reasons. Now, one thing I want to say about listening, and we talked about this at the beginning of the video, the sound you're striving for, there's not just one good sound. The sound you're striving for is supposed to be consistent with your purpose. I've taught students that they say, I want to be a great jazz player. Then maybe listening to Bud Herseth and all these great classical players is not necessarily the right thing for you. Maybe listen to that stuff because you like it. It's not going to help you be a great jazz player and get a great jazz sound. You can play jazz with a classical sound, but why would you if your purpose and your objective is to be a great jazz player, not a great crossover player? I have students also that want to be crossover players. They want to play jazz, they want to play classical. That's something different. You have to keep this in mind while you're doing your listening. You have to keep this in mind. Let's say you want to be a mariachi player. It's not going to really help. Not in the way that I'm talking about. I'm not saying don't do it. It's not going to help if you're listening to jazz players or listening to classical players, but not listening to mariachi. You should be listening to mariachi. The majority of your listening should be to mariachi music so that it aligns with your purpose. Because each one of those has a different sound. What constitutes a great sound in classical is not the same thing as a great sound in jazz. We talked about that earlier. Sometimes in jazz, and other styles as well, by the way, sometimes in jazz, you want to have that little bit of edge on your sound, or maybe not edge, maybe some fluff, you know, the air that I was talking about earlier. And because there's a lot of great jazz players that had that kind of earthiness. Let's talk, we're going to use positive terms here. It's an earthiness that makes it sound more human. That's, to me, those are the words I use to describe the difference between jazz and classical music. Classical music, especially the trumpet players doing it today, it sounds angelic. It sounds like it's from another world. The jazz stuff is right here. The jazz stuff sounds like this is who I am. I'm flawed. I'm less than perfect. But I'm beautiful. To me, that's the difference between a jazz sound and a classical sound. And when I say jazz, I mean the guys who are improvising, not necessarily the lead players. That's a whole different thing. But anyway, so you get my thing. Now, one thing I would like to say about this, and we will talk about this again later, you have to like what it is. If you don't like it, then it's not in alignment with your purpose. So if you say, I want to be a mariachi player, but you don't like mariachi trumpet sound, then yeah, it's time to figure out what it is that you're trying to do. Maybe you don't know what your purpose is yet. So maybe it's time to go back to square one. But we'll talk more about that in the other video. I actually have a story that goes with this whole you have to like it thing. Now, the next thing, once you have, I make it sound like it's sequential. It's not sequential. All these things need to happen all at the same time. But I do think it does help to get this stuff going in an order like this. The next thing is to do my physical trumpet pyramid. I've got videos online that talks about the physical trumpet pyramid. The physical trumpet pyramid helps you with your sound, your tone, by making sure that your embouchure is functioning in, I hesitate to use this word, the most efficient way. And there's something that happens when you do your exercises in that order. And when I say the physical trumpet pyramid, I'm not talking about I'm not saying you need to do my exercises. You can take that structure and apply it to the exercises that you're already doing, and you will get some benefit. And that's the benefit I'm talking about now. One of those benefits is not just that you're going to get better chops, you're also going to get a better sound by following that order. We'll talk more about that. I probably already have a video about that, but we'll do one on that. There's a lot of videos here, so, and I'm not timing them this time. I used to try to schedule one a week. That's too much. I got burnt out, and so I'm not going to do that this time. Next thing is to make sure you're resting. Now, this is down the list on the order, but it's usually the first thing I look for when someone comes to me and they have a bad sound. This is one of those 1001 reasons why somebody could have a bad sound. It's because they're not resting. If you don't rest, there are weird things that happen in your chops, and it can lead to a low tone purity. It can lead to the overtones. Harmonics and overtones are the same thing. It can lead to harmonics that are, some of them can be damped, so that you get somewhat of a, not fuzzy, but a dull sound, or a bright sound, because it might be the lower harmonics that are dulled, but the higher harmonics might be piercing. So yes, if you're not resting, it can do a lot to destroy your sound. And that is the first thing I look at. So even though theoretically it's down the list, it's very important. The next thing we're going to talk about is tonalization studies. My tonalization studies are very popular right now. These are scale studies. The difference between tonalization studies and other traditional scale studies is we only do one key per day. And notice I'm saying one key. We don't practice scales, we practice scale patterns. And we do those patterns. We try to do, with my students, we try to do 20 of them in a day, but some students don't have the time to do that. So we do 4 to 8 for those who don't have time, but we're striving for 20. 20 tonalization studies. These are 4 variations of 5 different exercises. We take it from the tonic all the way to your top range for that day, back down to your bottom range, and then back to the tonic again. Because of this system, there are things that happen, and I'll get into the details in that separate video. There are things that happen in your sound that I don't know of any other exercise that helps that well. Really. So anyway, let's move on. Equipment. Equipment does make a difference. Normally, when a mouthpiece makes a difference, it's going to be because you're playing on the wrong mouthpiece. I don't want you to think of it as a spectrum where there's bad at the bottom and good at the top, and we're just going to buy a better and better mouthpiece as we go. That's not how it works. Because you can have a mouthpiece that's too big, you can have a mouthpiece that's too small. Being too big will give you a bad sound. Being too small will give you a bad sound. Being too shallow will give you a bad sound. Having a mouthpiece that doesn't match your trumpet will give you a bad sound. This, once again, what I'm talking about here falls under the category of the 1001 reasons why you might have a bad sound. And yes, this is not normally the first thing I jump on with a student, but it will come up. If we get the resting taken care of, we get the physical trumpet pyramid thing going, and we've tried all these other things and the sound is not improving at all, then we start to look at your equipment. There have been some odd, rare instances with students that in the very first lesson we say, let's take a look at your mouthpiece. Because after all these years of working with students, I kind of know what a misfit mouthpiece sounds like. And there are times when we look at that. Aside from the mouthpiece, you can have a horn that doesn't work. It is possible. I had a student one time, and I don't think he got rid of it. The horn had no slot. You could literally bend the note up a half step, bend the note down a half step or farther, with no effort whatsoever. Yes, there are things in the trumpet that itself that can cause problems. I'm just going to give you a hint right now. If you're just now getting started with the trumpet, like you're high school or college or something, and you've been playing 5 to 10 years, stick with the standards. Don't buy, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this because people will, I love this horn, I love that horn, but really, you take a lot of the variables out of the picture if you just buy a regular Bach or a regular Yamaha or something like that. The time to use custom horns is after you know what works for you. If you add to the mix custom instruments before you know what you're doing, it can take a long, long time to figure that part of it out. So yes, equipment makes a difference. What else? There's also a component to getting a great sound, and I don't have my horn here, where you have to have some sort of feedback. We have a tendency while we're playing to switch off our ears, not just to what's going on around us, but also to what's coming out of our own bill. And we have to become more cognizant of what we sound like. It's not a do, 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 do. It needs to be a feedback loop. When something turns to the left, we need to steer it straight back. In fact, this reminds me of one of my other articles that I called Driving Straight Through Your Sound. Because in order, I used driving straight in a car as a metaphor. In order to stay straight, you have to keep turning the wheels to stay straight. If the car veers off this way, we got to veer off this way. If the car veers off this way, we got to adjust that way. And that's how you get a great sound, is to be paying attention to what's coming out of your bell. And as things move in that direction, you got to adjust. And one of the ways that I started doing this in the 80s, is to play, let's say this is the wall, you play with your bell right up against the wall so that it reflects back to your ears. That was a big thing in the 80s, and for a reason. If you're unaware of what's coming out the bell, how do you hope to actually ever match that up with what you're listening to? It's not possible. Now, there are some people that are more aware than others. I wasn't one of those. I had to actually work on that and get better at it. All right? So, yes, reflecting from the wall. Alternatively, you can record yourself. Now, the problem with recording, and that's the last thing we're going to talk about. The problem with recording is that your equipment matters what you're recording with. Now, I don't have a problem with someone recording with terrible equipment. Let's say you use your cell phone and you record with that. Or you use the microphone, the USB mic on your computer. I don't have a problem with that, because if you think that's terrible, then the process of finding a better way to make that work. For example, before I got all this equipment that I've got now, I used to have to put my USB mic on the far side of the room to get a good sound. The recordings I used to make for my students were always with a microphone that was literally 18 feet away. I think that's 18 feet. A microphone, I'm on this side of the room, and this is a nice sized room, and the microphone was in the other corner. In the process of trying to get a good sound with terrible equipment, you become more conscientious of just how terrible it sounds. Now, you have to have some tough skin, because that terrible sound you get isn't 100% your fault. The better recording equipment you have, the more honest the recording is that you're listening to. Now, which brings us to our last point here. When you listen to recordings, the tone that they get is often digitally manipulated. In fact, even not just that. Yes, what I just said is true, but there are other things like what I just said. There's mic placement. When I'm recording on my horn, that I'm pointing at my microphone, it's pretty much stays where I have it. It's more than 6 feet away. That makes a difference. If you have this microphone that I'm speaking into right now is 1.5 feet away. If I were to play this close to the microphone, it would be an entirely different sound. You would hear a lot of fuzz in my sound because I'm a naturally fuzzy player. That's because of my teeth and the diameter that I have to play on. There's way too much surface area vibrating, which creates a greater chance of fuzz in the sound. So one of the reasons why I have the mic so far away is the room absorbs a lot of that fuzz. But we want to keep that in mind when we're recording, that the sound that we get is not just 100% what we're doing. And so this works both ways. The sound that we're trying to create, it matters what kind of mic you have. It matters how far the mic is from the bell of your horn. It matters whether the floor is carpeted or bare, or whether you have bare windows or walls that don't have any coverings on them. All of that stuff changes the sound. And you have to find what works for you. You have to adjust all these things until you find what works for you. But it also works the flip side. When you're listening to these recordings, don't think, oh, this guy has a wonderful, wonderful sound. What you're hearing might actually be the technology. It might actually be the room. It might be just the fact that the guy doing the recording just really, really knows what he's doing. So you want to always keep that in mind. All right. So that's the introduction to this new series. We're going to have a series on all of these points and maybe some more that I might think about as we go. Maybe you can help me with this series. When I publish this, if you have specific questions about getting a great sound, please ask them, and it might affect what videos I make in the process of putting this series together. All right. Other than that, God bless you. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.